In this episode, we'll talk about relations with neighboring countries. This is really a classic example of bilateral diplomacy. Now, bilateral diplomacy means dealing with one country at a time. But in today's world, bilateral diplomacy has actually been complexified because every country has to work with other countries, with other powers. Our South Asian neighbors, for example, and I'm now mainly talking about the smaller countries in South Asia. We will talk about Pakistan in another episode and China in still another episode. So, but each of these smaller neighbors of India has to consciously think of its relationship with Pakistan and with China. It's a fact of life. Bilateral relations also now involve the way other countries interact with these two. In a way, we can say diplomacy management has become a kind of four-dimensional chess, if that is a good analogy. So let me start with Nepal. In many ways, the country closest to India in geography, in terms of people, and in the fact that Indians and Nepalese can travel to each other's countries without passports, without visas. All they need is an identity card. And that's really a relationship of trust. The one thing that we've not been able to do in our relations with Nepal, truthfully speaking, is that the huge hydropower potential has not been valorized. 80,000 megawatts of power which could be generated in Nepal, which would raise Nepal's national income by a major degree, has simply not happened. For all these years, but now finally, 2 hydropower projects on the Arun river are under execution. Other hydropower projects are also in the pipeline. Some are moving forward, some have long been blocked, but that's life. That's how international cooperation works. So, we have a solid relationship which works very well almost all the time, with periods of tension, periods of misunderstanding, but we are able to manage these because we know on both sides that India and Nepal have a huge set of unbreakable connections. The other country I should talk about in the same breath is Bhutan, a much smaller country, a population of barely 600,000 people, mountainous, but with extraordinary ties and connections with India, which again, you need to study this a little closely, but it is really an example of a solid relationship. And what has worked there particularly, apart from road building, apart from the other development cooperation that goes on all the time, is the construction of hydropower projects in Bhutan, which has given Bhutan a major source of income and wealth, and it has also worked to the benefit of India because we need the power for our industrial and other development projects. Bangladesh is a country that came into existence through a war in which India was a contributor to the self-liberation of Bangladesh. We had a wonderful relationship as long as Sheikh Mujibur Rahman was alive. After his assassination, there was a time of difficulty, but we have passed through that. We are now in a solid relationship with the present leader of Bangladesh, Sheikh Hasina, Sheikh Mujibur's daughter. But the relationship is multidimensional, multi-sided, and we are doing things today bilaterally that we had not done before in the history since 1971 when Bangladesh came into existence. So, I will come back to Bangladesh in another context in a moment. With Sri Lanka, Again, a solid relationship, went through difficult periods, but we are now on a firm ground with the government of President Ranil Wickremesinghe. The internal Indian factor, the ethnic, familial, cultural connections between the people of Tamil Nadu and the Tamils of Sri Lanka remain a positive factor, but they no longer cast a shadow on the relationship as they sometimes did because of the complexities of Sri Lanka's politics. Sri Lanka is today a forward-looking country. It has excellent economic indicators, but it's also gone through a period of stress because of its loans taken from China, which have become a big burden on the country. And this is an issue that Sri Lanka has to tackle. But India has come forward with financial aid, with economic aid to the benefit of the people of Sri Lanka. But it's a solid relationship which is moving forward. Maldives, a small nation, tiny population living on an archipelago of some 2,000 islands, most of them uninhabited. We have fine bilateral cooperation with the Maldives, and that is as it should be, because Maldives is an important, even if tiny, neighbor of India. In the same vein, I should bring in Mauritius. Mauritius is not part of South Asia, but Mauritius is, as we now say, a near neighbor. Across the ocean, some 3,000 miles away, Mauritius is a special friend in the fact that more than 75% of the people of Mauritius are of Indian origin. They are migrants who were brought as indentured labor and who have thrived. Now, Mauritius is held up by the World Bank as one of the models of development in Africa. Technically, it belongs to the African cluster. We rejoice in that because, after all, Mauritius is a special friend, exactly in the way that Maldives is. Afghanistan. Afghanistan has gone through its own turmoil over so many decades since the Russian invasion, the Soviet invasion into that country in 1979. Now we hope that Afghanistan begins to move forward. It is gone through turmoil of a very massive kind. It's not clear if all that turmoil has ended, but India's hope and expectation is that Afghanistan should have an open relationship with all countries, that it should not be under the dominance of any particular power. And India has traditional, cultural, and historical linkages with Afghanistan which are valuable. Now let me turn to South Asian cooperation. We have an organization called SAARC, South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, which has been established in 1985 on the initiative of Bangladesh, but it has not worked as effectively as it could have. Regional organizations, their integration, their ability to work together is measured in terms of what percentage of their trade, their global trade, is among the members of the group. And going by that yardstick, SAARC does not do very well. The main reason, of course, is that Pakistan continues to treat trade with India as some kind of a weapon which it thinks it can use to put political pressure on India in terms of its own ambitions in Kashmir and elsewhere. Now, that's a long story which I hope I will cover briefly in a conversation about Pakistan. But for now, let me say that while SAARC is in a kind of limbo right now, not moving forward very much, some cooperation, of course, which is beneficial. The interesting development is that there is a group called BBIN, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India and Nepal, that has come into existence largely at the initiative of the Asian Development Bank. And these banks play a very valuable role, not just in economic development, but indirectly also in political cooperation. And this is very interesting. Now, where these four countries work together today is particularly in developing transport networks in terms of trade, in terms of transit trade, road networks, train networks, and river networks. For the first time in South Asia, rivers are being harnessed for transport. And this is a new development for which the present government would surely take credit, and it is an important development. New oil pipelines have been established, for example. All this is a symbol of hope in South Asia, the expectation that we will move forward in our cooperation. Thank you very much.